The nation goes into a panic over COVID 19, the coronavirus. Stocks tumble due to an unstable market, and even amid the fact that we are lowering our Fed rate to 0%. The debate was last night, and we'll talk about some highlights of that. And Ilhan is married, and this time she's not keeping it in the family. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. All right, guys, I'm going to try and do something a little bit differently with this episode of Contemporary for those of you who are following on live because I was reading the articles and facing away from the camera, and I'm not going to do that. So I've got the stream monitor over here, over to my left, and I will actually be looking at you while I'm reading here. Hopefully, that'll keep me a little bit more focused on the audio and the way that the audio is sitting. And I was getting a little bit of a variance in my audio just from facing over and not being on the. Oh, look, I'm getting ads already here. Not being over and not necessarily always talking into the microphone, but we're going to try and do this a bit differently here. So, this has been a mess of a weekend, and I knew that coming up even before I got out of work on Friday. I looked at everything else that was going on. I mean, Friday night, I had to stop. I had to shut my news down, and I had to get away from the fear porn because it is getting bad. And I still believe that a lot of this is overblown. I don't think this is nearly as bad as everyone thinks it is. It's just they're being told to panic at this point, and they weren't being told to panic before when all of this was under Mr. Obama. But we'll talk just a bit about that as we go along here. First, I want to talk about, well, first before anything, go ahead and check out freedomscoop.com, where you'll get access to all kinds of great creators. We've got the R-Rated Conservative over there. We've got The Generational Gap is over there. We've got Stephen Ignoramus and his various shows. I'm over there with my various shows here. And we do have one more, Wyatt Birkenhoff is over there too with his solo video series as well. And we do have one other podcast that's going to be coming aboard and a couple of other writers as well that are going to be coming aboard as well to try and get some news out here. I am very excited for the changes that are coming up here. I want to build this to be something that everyone can enjoy, people can get their written news from, where people can get their podcasts from and their commentary from. And I'd rather have this. I don't want to see the Daily Wire go up with people who are great but are out of touch with reality. So I do want to have, I want people to have access to news that comes from people who, for lack of better terms, shower before they go to work and shower after they go to work. I know Subverse is another one where there are just a lot of professionals out there. I know they're closer to the working class, but you can either go to Daily Wire, CNN, and talk to people who make seven figures, or you can come over to Freedom Scoop and you can listen to people who, for the most part, are getting 40, 50 grand a year just like the rest of you. So I'm looking forward to some of the changes that are coming along. I really, really hope that everyone enjoys what we're doing with this. And yeah, go over and check us out. So to start off with here, this is from CCN, not CNN, CCN. Market news, Dow Jones collapses because New York is now Wuhan. This is from Ben Brown over at CCN. The coronavirus outbreak has forced New York to shut down schools, restaurants, theaters, and other places with public gatherings as the number of confirmed cases in the city hits Wuhan's tally when China put the city, the epicenter of the global pandemic, on lockdown. Excuse me, I sound like I've got the COVID-19 right now. The stock market will plunge deeper into bear market territory on Monday. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures fell 5% overnight, triggering circuit breakers to halt trading. The New York Governor, Andrew Cuomo, called on U.S. President Donald Trump to mobilize the military to help fight the coronavirus. Oh, okay, that's the photo caption. Their photo captions are like right on the same font size as the regular article. It's just a little bit smaller, so yeah, I didn't catch that at first. The drop comes as New York prepares to shut down schools, bars, and restaurants. The financial capital of the world now has 329 cases of the novel coronavirus, just shy of the number in Wuhan when the city went into lockdown. So yes, they are planning on doing another massive sell-off today. I know we were sitting at a really, really good place when we left on Friday because we went into national emergency territory, and I think people were a bit more confident by that point here. But Yeah, no, we're going right back into this as we go along into the weekend, and it's understandable why we're going into this. To be completely honest, I understand why we're doing this, but the reality of life is if nobody can go out and buy and sell, then stocks are going to flatline and people are going to sell out because they're not making anything. And of course, as we can see with the toilet paper crisis, and we'll talk a bit about that a bit later here, people are expecting that they're never going to be able to go out and buy and sell again, that they're just going to be trapped in their homes forever, and this is going to never blow over. People are going to be in a permanent quarantine and never be able to see the light of day again. Of course, that is not what's going to happen here, but yeah, that's what people seem to think. I think with the runs on toilet paper, I'm pretty sure people are buying up to the point where they're never going to be able to come out of their houses again. So, of course, with when we'll talk a bit about restaurants and everything shutting down, yeah, the commerce industry, the day-to-day industry is dying right now, and nobody wants to buy, nobody wants to sell, and that's not going to make anybody any money over on Wall Street here. So let's check in with CNN on the same sort of situation if it loads up here. Yeah, we're getting ready to get to that new computer territory, so got the case coming. I think the next step is I'll get the motherboard coming. I'm doing it one piece at a time. I'm doing it Johnny Cash style because, I mean, I'm not a seven-figure CNN pundit, so I can't go out and buy the tippy top of the line right off the bat, but we'll get her one piece at a time. It'll be great, and we'll be able to do a great show for it. And because of the nature of computing, of course, by the time I get it built, it'll be obsolete anyway. I'll get it all built, brand new, and the next day it'll be completely obsolete. But let's talk about what CNN's got to say here. So, Dow futures plunge 1,000 points after Fed cuts interest rate to zero. This is from Rob McClain, Laura He, and Laura Horowitz over at CNN Business. Come on. Global stock markets plunged Monday as investors were unnerved by drastic action from the U.S. Federal Reserve to cushion the blow from coronavirus, and as data show the outbreak has caused unprecedented economic collapse in China. Markets were battered across Asia, with Australia's benchmark index crashing nearly 10% on its worst day on record. In Europe, London's FTSE 100 UKX fell 8%, while France's CAC 40 plunged over 10%, and Germany's DAX dropped roughly 9%. The European Securities and Markets Authority required short sellers to provide more information about their activities, saying the pandemic constitutes a serious threat to the orderly functioning and integrity of the financial markets. And I'm very interested, given the fact that we're seeing what it was that Europe did already, because they're approaching close of markets already at this point. Some European countries do have their markets closed, but they're approaching the close of markets at this point. But I mean, they're losing out big time on the stock market. And while 4.5 to 4.8% seems huge for the U.S. given where we were at the time, and people's 401ks are definitely going to show it, we're not suffering as much as Europe and Asia are right now. So, but that's at the beginning of trading as well. So we will see what happens at the end of trading. U.S. markets were poised to suffer heavy losses. Dow, INDU futures were down 1,041 points, or about 4.5%. S&P 500 futures slumped 4.8%, while NASDAQ futures shed 4.5%. There are now more than 3,000 cases of novel coronavirus, according to government agencies and the CDC. Investors bailed out of stocks despite massive intervention by the U.S. Federal Reserve on Sunday. The central bank slashed rates to close to zero in an emergency meeting and said it would purchase another $700 billion worth of treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities. Yeah, because that's what we need. More government in the bank. More government and more people taking out loans that they can't afford. The shock rate cut is designed to prevent the economic shock leading to the kind of credit crunch and financial market disruptions that occurred during the global financial crisis, the last time the Fed cut rates all the way to the bottom. I don't think the Fed would have done this unless they felt the financial markets were at significant risk of freezing up tomorrow. They're very concerned the financial markets won't work, so I don't know how the markets take solace in this. Mark Zandi, the chief economist of Moody's Analytics, told CNN Business. And this is going to be a big part of why. On Monday, airline stocks were badly hit as they announced waves of flight cancellations. In response to global travel restrictions, Air France KLM opened 12% lower, and ICAGY, owner of British Airways, fell 16%. So, yes, as of today rather, is it tonight at midnight? Or was it last night at midnight? I'll have to check into that. I guess I didn't realize. I knew they had said Monday at midnight, but I didn't remember if it was at the beginning or the end. But either last night or tonight, the travel restriction from Europe goes on to include the UK, so they can't come over here anymore at this point, and that's going to be a lot of their flights. So yeah, you can see why they're stumbling. But of course, now the flights are canceling. Nobody wants to fly across the country either because they don't want to be in the 40,000 pound incubator, and that's going to be what's dragging the stocks down. But I mean, everybody's hunkering down at this point, imagining that they're going to be in their houses forever. I just said that a bit ago on the toilet paper crunch. So with that being said, nobody is going out and buying and selling. The economy is going to essentially freeze this week, no matter what they do with the Fed, unless, I mean, people are going out there and saying, well, screw this, this isn't anything crazy or anything. I know I've noticed slowdown at my big boy day job. Without people purchasing, none of these stocks are going to go up. So yes, I'm definitely seeing why these are dropping here right now. I'm interested to see what happens and if things start going back up, and I'm kind of interested as well to see with the state of emergency if people were doing their prep buying. That's what drove us up for the last minute on Friday, but we will see what comes up off of this. Like I said, with the Trump administration, I've got a track record of being wrong because I look at some of the decisions that they make and I say, you're out of your mind, this isn't going to work, and this is going to make things worse. And then 2 weeks later, everything is 10 times better, usually as a result of something that the Trump administration did. So right now, I don't see a way out of this, but given the erratic nature of our president, it's way too early to tell. So with the Fed rate going down there, I did find an article over on CNBC that talks about what this means and why they did it this way. So this is from Steve Leisman over at CNBC. The Federal Reserve cuts rate to zero and launches massive $700 billion quantitative easing program. The Federal Reserve saying the coronavirus outbreak has harmed communities and disrupted economic activity in many countries, including the United States, cut interest rates to essentially zero on Sunday, and launched a massive $700 billion quantitative easing program to shelter the economy from the effects of the virus. The new federal fund rates used as a benchmark for both short-term lending for financial institutions and as a peg to many consumer rates will now be targeted at 0% or 0.25%, down from a previous target range of 1% to 1.25%. So this is what Biden was talking about. Well, both of them, Biden and Bernie, were talking about last night at the debate, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we get down into the show. But this is the interest-free loans that Bernie was railing about on the debate stage. This isn't a bailout so much, but this is the opportunity to have the federal government do the bailout to some of these banks that are going to suffer as they go along, because they can go out and they can lend out money that they're borrowing from the Federal Reserve without having to worry about paying back the interest to the Federal Reserve, so that anything that they're getting off the customers is pure profit for them, essentially. And they can offer at a slightly lower rate because they don't have so much overhead to cover. So that's what's happening with this, and I don't like it. I don't really care for it at all. I don't want the Federal Reserve involved in anything, but I also know that we do have to do something here. And once again, 2 weeks later, this could be the best thing that ever happened to the country. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but 2 weeks later, we could all be sitting back in decadence and laughing about what had happened with the coronavirus and laughing at the panic buying at the toilet paper, and everybody has a fully funded stock 401k again. That's, like I said, that seems to be the pattern with this president. He does something that everybody believes would be stupider than F, and then turn around and it winds up being great. Thank you, advertisement for CNBC. I don't care about Morning Squawk. So, with that in mind, we're going to talk a bit about, or closer in detail now, about why the stocks are tumbling because of all of the massive shutdowns that we see across the country. And I mean, some states, not this state obviously and gladly, but some states are like shuttering bars and things for the working people as well. They're shuttering restaurants. So, I mean, at some point you are hunkered down in your house and not allowed to go anywhere. But let's see what CNN has to say about this. This is from Madeline Holcomb over at CNN. Millions across the U.S. wake up to massive shutdowns to curb spread of coronavirus. The end of a weekend spent indoors away from neighbors, friends, and communities of worship will not bring relief to Americans on Monday as they face a slew of new restrictions designed to curb the spread of coronavirus. More than 30 million students are out of school, a growing number of restaurants are prohibited from inviting customers inside, entertainment venues are becoming harder to come by, and even some public beaches are closing in Florida, which is probably the smart thing to do given the fact that we just read an article on Friday, or we didn't read the article on Friday, but I summarized it because it was prohibited from being retransmitted due to Channel 3000's strict regiment of copyright. But I mean, these kids are going to Florida and they're going on their spring break. Coronavirus be damned. So they're going to be out drinking, partying, and screwing each other for an entire week and pass that stuff around as fast as they pass the clap around. So it's all going to come back, and due to the fact that it's airborne and they're going to come back from spring break like this, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and close those beaches. I know it's going to be a hit for Orlando, but these kids aren't heeding any sort of warning because they're 19 and they think they're invincible. So absolutely close those beaches down. As much as I don't want to see it and as much as I want to see the free market win on this one, the free market is stepping in to interrupt the flow of COVID-19. So I don't see a downside on this. As U.S. coronavirus cases have increased, there are at least 3,485 cases and 65 fatalities. So, to have efforts to prevent future spread. Social distancing, a preventative measure encouraged by health and government officials, is altering the way people in the U.S. eat, work, study, and socialize. Students in at least 31 states, as well as in Los Angeles and New York City, are not heading to school. School districts and universities have started to transition to online methods of instruction until work can resume in classrooms. States including Illinois, Ohio, Massachusetts have placed restrictions on the operations of bars and restaurants. We'll look at that just a little bit closer here in a second. To discourage people from gathering in close proximity of one another. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is ordering all bars and restaurants to close to the public beginning Monday night until March 30th. He said at a news briefing Sunday, Illinois officials are working with restaurant owners and food delivery services to coordinate so restaurants can keep kitchens open for food delivery, Pritzker said. So, I mean, your DoorDash, your Eat Street, your Grubhub are going to help along with this. So the free market is going to help as we go along with this. But, I mean, still, this is going to be devastating for a lot of people, especially in the rural Illinois communities. I know Chicago is going to be, unfortunately, okay. I think they could use to be knocked down a peg or two, but for the most part, I think they're going to be okay. But I mean, these rural places are going to be hard up as we go along, given off of this. So, yeah, it's scary what they're trying to do here, and the fact that they are trying to shutter commerce, given the fact the stock market is dropping like this. I guess if it was me looking at some of these things that are closing right now, I guess I would be allowing people to quarantine by themselves if I was a business owner if they wanted to, but I'd be offering fancy incentives and some extra pay if people did want to come in and work alongside everybody else. If people actually wanted to come in, I would say, hey, here's an extra $1 an hour for coming in during this crisis and working. You're putting yourself at risk, and it would be on a volunteer basis. course, like I said, I tried to sweeten the pot, but people who want to quarantine can quarantine. People who want to come in and do the work can come in and do the work, I guess. But I guess that's not good enough for Pritzker, so we'll see how Illinois fares off of this, especially in the downstate area. And we do have couple other stories that are coming out of Illinois here. So this is from Time. Give that a second to load up here as we close another article and hopefully free up a little bit of RAM. So this is from Sudin Tanawala. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. Illinois shuts down bars, restaurants due to coronavirus. So this is a bit more localized. The governor of Illinois on Sunday ordered all bars and restaurants in his state to close amid the threats of the new coronavirus, and officials elsewhere in the country said they were considering similar restrictions after revelers ignored warnings against attending large gatherings. The time for persuasion in public appeals is over. Governor J.B. Pritzker said, "This is not a joke. No one is immune to this." So that's scary language right in and of itself. The Democratic governor said he had tried earlier this week to appeal to everyone's good judgment to stay home, to avoid bars and not congregate in crowds. He added that it is unfortunate that many people didn't take this seriously. The order takes effect Monday night and will last through March 30th. In New Orleans and Chicago, people clad in green for St. Patrick's Day packed bars, spilled into crowded sidewalks on Saturday, even after the cities canceled their parades. So that's the other thing here, too. I mean, as far as I know, a lot of the local things are still going on for St. Patrick's Day. I don't live in a highly Irish community, so we don't really have much as far as a parade goes, but I know Boston is talking about closing down their parade, and that is the point where people actually believe the Chicken Little hype that the sky is falling if Boston shuts down their St. Patrick's Day parade, because I mean that place is so Irish, it's got a green tinge to it. It is just, my God. Anyway, and then of course New Orleans is shutting theirs down. I'm curious to see how Mardi Gras went down in New Orleans. Chicago is talking about shutting down the parade, or they did actually shut down the parade already. These heavily Irish cities that are shutting down this massive party that they have every year just shows the sky is falling mentality, the Chicken Little mentality off of this. And like I said, yeah, Chicago, they'll find a way. They've got DoorDash, they've got everything else available. But, I mean, the little diner down the road in some rural town in southern Illinois is not going to have the same advantages that Rockford and Chicago are going to have up on the north end of the state. They're not going to have the same things you could get out of the west suburbs here. So it'll be interesting to see. And like I said, I think this is going to drop the stock market even further than anything else has dropped it so far. But this isn't the only thing that's really getting scary out of here. I mean, we're edging over here on martial law. And we've got one side that's saying, yes, let's do some martial law. And we've got another side that's saying, maybe we don't need to do it. And the one that's saying we might not need to do it will surprise you here. But this is from MSN News via The Hill from Ellen Mitchell. And I got this link via Jake from Freedom Scoop. He put it up in a Discord server. So we'll check out what we've got to say here. Roughly 400 National Guard personnel have been activated in 6 states to help curtail the spread of coronavirus, with another 600 expected to join them within 24 hours, the National Guard Bureau announced on Friday. As of this morning, about 400 Air and Army National Guard professionals in 6 states, Florida, Iowa, Louisiana, New York, Rhode Island, and Washington, are providing personnel in support of civil authority at the direction of their governors in response to COVID-19, the National Guard said. Civil authority is something that scares the crap out of me when I start hearing government officials talk about that, because you're bordering on martial law once you're getting to that point here. I do appreciate the men and women in the National Guard that are mobilizing to help this. I really do, but you're one step away from using the military then to enforce the will if they decide they need to go this way. And given what Gretchen Whitmer said earlier on this week, That's a real possibility at this point. So that's something we need to watch closely. As other states are requested to support civil authorities, those numbers will change rapidly. By the end of the day, we expect that number to approach 1,000, the statement read. President Trump on Friday declared a national emergency over the coronavirus outbreak. The move will free up more federal aid to go to states and municipalities battling the spread of the deadly illness, which the World Health Organization classified as a pandemic on Wednesday. More than 135,000 cases have been reported globally, including more than 1,800 in the United States, as well as more than 5,000 deaths. And it looks like there is a charity. I'll link this article in my Discord server, but it looks like there is a charity that is raising, they're up to $3,200. So if you got a couple bucks to throw to them, we'll vet the charity, of course, to make sure that it's not a 98% administrative fee that goes with it, like the U.S. government does with charity here. But yeah, go ahead if you can throw a couple bucks to them. State and local leaders have so far largely taken measures into their own hands to help halt the spread of the virus, with 33 states declaring emergencies, starting with Washington State on February 29th. Which Washington State had a massive number of deaths, so I understand the fact that they're declaring a state of emergency. Because it all ravaged through a nursing home, which the elderly appear to be the most vulnerable to all this. Multiple state and local governments have also banned large public gatherings and canceled schools for the week. The Guard's effort to combat the illness include training personnel on coronavirus response, identifying and preparing Guard facilities for use as isolation housing, and compiling state medical supply inventories, according to the statement. So, I mean, they're talking about mandatory quarantine and compulsory quarantine at this point too, which I'm going to need to see a warrant before you're going to come and take me into compulsory quarantine. I'm sorry. I'm going to need to see something signed by a judge and a law enforcement agency before you do that. In addition, the Guard will provide such assistance as logistical support, disinfection and cleaning, transportation of medical personnel, call center support, and meal delivery. Okay, the meal delivery I do understand, because yes, we are worried about some of the commerce that's going with the food in more rural areas in Illinois. So that I can get behind at least. I kind of wish the federal government hadn't done it, but that I can at least get behind on this. And speaking of martial law, now let's see what Miss Gretchen Whitmer had to say, which once again, I still hear this name and all I think is the chick from Mean Girls. Lacey Chabert's character in Mean Girls, Gretchen Wiener. That's all that I think about every time I hear this woman's name. But this is from the Tennessee Star. Mary Margaret Olohan is the author here. The governor of Michigan dodged a question on whether she would rule out martial law as a response to the coronavirus pandemic on Friday. Which, if you don't know what martial law is, I'm sorry, but you need to know what that is and what they are planning to do. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer discussed the outbreak of the coronavirus Friday morning on the Michael Patrick Shields talk radio show. Shields asked Whitmer whether she would declare martial law in the state of Michigan. Could we get to a position where it's sort of like martial law, where everything is closed and everybody stays home like it is in Italy? That is not martial law, my friend. Oh, you are downplaying that hard. Where you only have the hospitals and the drugstores open, Shields asked. I think we have to make decisions based on where the facts and science dictate, Whitmer said. At this juncture, it's too early to make any statements. It wouldn't be responsible to make any statements on that front. I will tell you that every decision we make will be transparent about it. What's driving the decision, she added, we will share it as quickly as we can with the public once the decision has been made, and we will always put the health and safety of the people of the state first and foremost, and that will drive all decisions. So, yeah. She's not saying yes and she's not saying no. So, my Michigander friends, prepare. That's all I'm going to say. Worst case scenario, as Tim Pool always says, you'll have a cool taco night once all of this blows over. But, yeah, they're talking about this. But we do have one other state that is saying that martial law is unnecessary, and this would surprise you. This is from the Sacramento Bee. Thank you, Sophia Bolog and Amy Chance. Martial law not needed to combat coronavirus in California, Governor Gavin Newsom says. Come on. California Governor Gavin Newsom is issuing guidelines, not edicts, to implore people to minimize social exposure to limit spread of coronavirus, saying it's not time to order Californians to do things they're already doing on their own. On Sunday, he said he has confidence that people and businesses will follow his recommendations to close all bars for all people over 65 to self-quarantine, arguing it's not necessary for him to make the guidance an enforceable order. So the governor of California is saying we don't need to get the government and the military involved to enforce my will, but the governor of Michigan won't say no, that's not necessary. She's going to leave that up on the table, so consider that for a second. And AOC too. I didn't get an article that confirmed that, but AOC was talking some of the same during the St. Patrick's Day thing after she made her statement saying that not going to Chinese food restaurants is racist for whatever the hell reason. She also said that we need to avoid going to bars at this point, bars and restaurants. And I couldn't help but commenting once I saw that and said, well, Miss Cortez, what is it exactly that you have against the Irish people and their culture? I think AOC is kind of racist. So the last article that I have here, this is something that I found on Friday. And this is from the Washington Examiner. Illinois mayor signs executive order granting power to ban sale of guns and alcohol while addressing coronavirus. So this is one of those things of never ever let a good crisis go to waste, because now a mayor in Champaign, Illinois is trying to use this crisis to enact a gun control agenda. And I'm a little surprised out of Champaign, because I've been to Champaign and that doesn't seem like the kind of place that would do that. But apparently they're doing this. This is from Madison Dibble. The mayor of Champaign, Illinois, gave herself the power to ban the sale of guns and alcohol after declaring a citywide emergency to address the coronavirus. Mayor Deborah Frank Finan signed the executive order on Thursday declaring a state of emergency for the city. That executive order, which is in line with municipal code, comes with extraordinary powers for the mayor to enact over a short period of time as the city combats the spread of coronavirus. Why, oh why, would you want to ban the sale of guns even temporarily? Do you want people to be used to not being able to buy them? Why? Never let a good crisis go to waste. And yes, like I said, now we are back to a point where we are getting to that martial law territory, and the executive orders are just rolling in to try and make things happen. Among the powers Finan gained after signing the executive order was the power to ban the sale of guns, ammunition, alcohol, and gasoline. Finan could also cut off access to individuals' gas and water or electricity. That's some scary stuff. The city also has the ability to take possession of private property or order the temporary closing of all bars and liquor stores. Jeff Hamilton, the city's manager, told WAND the executive order allows the city to be flexible to properly respond to the emergency needs of our community. None of the options will necessarily be implemented, but are available. That's the point of it right now. It's not that they're going to do it, it's the fact that they could. But are available in order to protect the welfare and safety of our community if needed. So the people of Champaign, essentially at this point, by executive order, of course, they did it in a compulsory fashion, just gave up their liberty and their freedom in the name of safety, and they deserve neither. And they will probably lose both. So good job, Champaign. I'm sure that this is going to face some major backlash as they go along here. So that's what I have on coronavirus news here. Let's go ahead and talk about everybody else who wants to take away your freedom. So we had a debate last night, and it was interesting to say the least. I think old Joe took his medicine for the most part, but he still had his tendency to go ahead and stop talking in the middle of a sentence and not complete a thought here, but this is what Marianne Marsh has to say over on, this is the opinion piece over on Fox News. I want to specify this is opinion, this is not actual news, but in Biden-Sanders debate, solutions win and revolution loses. While starting a debate focused on the coronavirus by coughing wasn't the best move by former Vice President Joe Biden, yeah, I don't know if anybody else caught that, but he started hacking up a lung right at the beginning of it, and it was kind of hilarious because they were talking about COVID-19 at the time. He employed the right strategy in his first one-on-one matchup against Senator Bernie Sanders on Sunday night, making it about solutions versus a revolution. Biden addressed the coronavirus crisis and every topic discussed with real answers to the existing challenges we face today. In contrast, Sanders missed the mark by relying on his stump speech about a revolution to change healthcare and other important aspects of American society. Well, yes, I mean, Bernie Sanders is going to the executive branch to try and enact his pet project, and he's made that very clear as he's gone along. And he will use whatever crisis he can to get that point across. With a very strong performance, Biden was the clear winner of the debate between the Democratic presidential candidates. Yes, many headlines will focus on the commitment Biden made to select a woman as his vice presidential running mate. He also made the news by committing to putting an African American woman on the Supreme Court if he becomes president. But it was the stark contrast between Biden and Sanders, and by extension with President Trump, that really mattered in the debate. Biden's pledges on female appointments were meaningful historically and politically. It was also smart to make sure there was a headline or two in case the evening didn't go well, but Biden not only made news, he delivered a great performance as well. The former vice president provided specifics throughout the debate, whether it was calling for dealing with the worsening coronavirus crisis by adding more hospital beds or deploying the military to assist in the emergency response. He showed he knew what to do about the pandemic, as well as a range of other topics. No, I don't think yet we were watching the same debate, Miss Marsh. We definitely were watching the same debate, if that's what you took away from that. Rarely did Sanders tackle a problem head-on with a solution. Instead, he leaned on his well-worn campaign rhetoric or parts of his record, especially his oft-repeated desire to reform healthcare system with Medicare for all. In contrast, Biden did an especially good job defending the Obama administration bailouts, and we'll talk about that in just a second here, that saved the economy and prevented the Great Recession from becoming a depression. He pointed out that many of the very people who Sanders constantly claims to represent, blue-collar workers, small business owners, and hourly wage earners, would have been hurt the most if Sanders had his way and thwarted the bailout. Yeah, that was an important thing to take away from this debate here, was the fact that, yes, they had a good 20 minutes screaming back and forth about the bailout that the Obama administration and the end of the Bush administration both put in place to try and make sure that the banks continued to go. And Bernie Sanders did say that it was all just an interest-free loan, and Biden jumped up and said there was interest on it and they paid it. Yes, it was a very reduced interest rate, but yes, it was to a point where it was almost interest-free, and I understand that. I stand against the bank bailout. I still do. I'm surprising with Bernie Sanders on this, but of course, Bernie Sanders is trying to get all millionaires and billionaires out of every aspect of life so the government can take over these businesses and employ the people rather than having billionaire CEOs do it. So yes, it is no surprise that he stood against the bailouts here, but the other side of that is, yes, I think that there should have been a restructuring. Yes, I do understand that a lot of this bailout money did go to the CEOs, and for the most part, it lined their pockets rather than trying to help the business out. And they could have restructured it, sold off some things, and allowed some other people to come into the market. But I mean, we didn't crumble and we didn't go into a depression either, which I see some scenarios where that could have happened. I don't see all scenarios where that could have happened, but I do see some where we could have seen that instead. So I do tend to stay on the non-government intervention side, but Biden did make some good points off of that. So this is from 538. filed under the 2020 election. What went down at the first Biden versus Sanders debate? Okay, this article had text a minute ago. Let me refresh that. I don't know if they took this article down or what happened here, but yeah, there's no text in this article, and there was when I loaded it up. So, well, let's get rid of that one. So I wouldn't normally go to Reddit as far as a political tool, but I was able to pull an article off of this. But over on Reddit, there was a discussion thread from a Bernie Sanders for President thread talking about the fact that Joe Biden brought up Bernie Sanders' 9 super PACs. Now, I don't believe that Bernie Sanders does have 9 super PACs, but one of the things that came off of this, and I actually thought this was a really good strategy. Of course, everybody who watched the debate would remember the fact that about the middle of it, Joe Biden accused Bernie Sanders of having 9 super PACs, and Bernie Sanders countered perfectly, well, would you like to list them for me? And Biden came out and said, oh, come on, man. Just forget about all this here. Now, a lot of people would think that this is a bad strategy, and for the most part, when I first saw it, I did think it was a bad strategy, but the first thing that I did when I got up this morning and started preparing for this show was looked up the 9 super PACs. And I found, of course, that there were not 9 super PACs, but I also did find a series of PACs, a large series of PACs out there that are supporting the Vermont senator here. And he is coming out and trying to say that he's only taking small donations from private citizens and he's all grassroots. But National Nurses United, the Sunrise Movement, Dream Defenders, Center for Popular Democracy Action, People's Action, and Our Revolution would like to argue with that. And of course, none of these are super PACs, but given the fact that he is taking money that isn't grassroots means that he's been lying about his entire campaign finance apparatus as well. So people went in trying to disprove that, and now they're coming out and finding the fact that yes, Bernie Sanders is taking corporate money to try and fund his campaign and political action committee money as well. So he is just as much in the swamp as everybody else. And that, I think, is going to shake up a few things as we go into the election here. I also have from Sludge, which I don't believe is NewsGuard verified, so take all of this with a grain of salt here. This is Alex Koch over here. Does Bernie Sanders get support from big money super PACs? And this is a fact check against Elizabeth Warren here. Asked whether billionaires should be allowed to spend colossal amounts of their own money in the Democratic presidential primary, Senator Elizabeth Warren said no. In her answer, she wagered that she and Senator Amy Klobuchar were the only 2 candidates on stage who were running without support from wealthy super PAC donors. Well, you have to keep in mind that when Warren was still running, she was running off of her Senate campaign money because she was in a relatively safe state, and she raised massive amounts of money for her Senate campaign. So she would either have to give the money back or keep it in an account for another race. She can't take it and pocket it. So keep that in mind. She has taken super PAC donations before, and she was still using them in her presidential bid. I heard everyone talking about, as Democrats, we all want to overturn Citizens United because we want to end this unlimited spending, she said. Yeah, except everyone on the stage except Amy and me, it's either a billionaire or is receiving help from PACs that can do unlimited spending. So if you really want to live where you say, then put your money where your mouth is and say no to the PACs. Well, she needs to be the first one to say that. And the article goes on, and I don't want to spend a lot of time into this because it is a bit dated at this point because it's Warren. But yeah, this was what the Redditor cited his information from when he brought up Bernie Sanders' PACs. Not necessarily super PACs, but the PACs that he is receiving money from. Let's go on to see what we got from Breitbart here. Joe Biden complains no one went to jail over the Wall Street bailout when he was vice president. This is a nice short article, too. This is from Charlie Spearing. Former Vice President Joe Biden complained Sunday that no one went to jail for the 2008 financial crisis, despite being in office when those officials could have been prosecuted. I agree with Bernie Sanders. Someone should have gone to jail. That was the big disagreement I had in terms of bailing out, Joe Biden complained during the CNN Democratic debate on Sunday night. Biden was the vice president under President Barack Obama, taking office just months after the Wall Street bailout occurred, and was in office for 8 years. Biden voted for the bailout while Senator Sanders did not. The former vice president defended the 2008 bailout, noting that if the United States government did not act quickly, the economy would have slipped into a depression. Look, the fact of the matter is that if, in fact, banks had all gone under, we would be in a Great Depression, he said. So, yes, absolutely, like he said, we probably would have gone worse for the most part if these companies wouldn't have taken the government money. We probably would have wound up worse, but for the most part, they would have also been forced to sell off what they had and restructure themselves so that they weren't so too big to fail in the future here. That's part of the problem is the government has determined that some of these companies are too big to fail. So they'll keep them up and hold them up, especially considering the fact that a lot of these big companies are donating to Democrats at this point with no repercussions. And now people like Joe Biden can get up on the debate stage and talk about the fact that he should have prosecuted and arrested some of these people, meanwhile taking their money. So good for you, Breitbart. Thanks for giving us that article. And once again, with Breitbart, you do have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, but it's still, for the most part, it's a good source. So the debate we'll be talking more about the debate tonight on Ed's World here. I am supposed to be interviewing Soraya Fass, Libertarian presidential candidate, but she has yet to respond to me, so I'll reach out to her in a bit. But let's talk a bit about everybody's favorite Minnesota Congresswoman, Ilhan Omar. So this came up on Friday on an Instagram post, which means she must have gone out and done it Thursday night. Representative Ilhan Omar has become married to the man she swears she was not having an affair with, even though he came out and admitted that there was an affair and got a divorce over it. She swore there was nothing going on there, and all of a sudden now she's married. So this is from New York Post by John Levine. Critics question ethics of Ilhan Omar's marriage to embattled campaign consultant. Rep. Ilhan Omar said "I do" only days ago, but her union is already being questioned. The Minnesota Democrats' critics were wondering out loud about payments her campaign has made to the political consulting firm run by her new husband Timothy Minette. E Street Group had received at least $370,000 from Omar's campaign back in November, the Post reported. At the time, the two were widely assumed to be lovers, and the payment sparked an official ethics complaint from the Federal Election Commission, from the National Legal Policy Center, a conservative watchdog group. Last night, Ilhan Omar announced she married her rumored lover, Tim Minette, in the second half of 2019. 40% of Omar's campaign funds went to Minette's firm, conservative activist Charlie Kirk tweeted on Thursday. Taxpayers funded her campaign. Now they're funding her marriage. This is not. How is this not an FEC violation? In October, Omar filed for divorce from Ahmed Abdisalan Hirsi, citing irretrievable breakdown of their marriage and also the fact that they're siblings. But that's none of my business. Omar broke news of her new husband in an Instagram post earlier this week. Got married, from partners in politics to life partners. So blessed. Alhamdulillah. I can't read Arabic. I'm sorry. It's not that I have ideological differences. It's just really, really weird spelling, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of that. A spokesman for Omar's office did not immediately respond to requests for comment from the Post about the possible ethics concerns. So Christensen had a good video about this, and Tim Pool talked about it as well. Plus, Boulder Vaughn, a fan that I talked to on Discord as well, all brought up the same idea. Now, this is all fine and good, given the fact that, yes, they're married. They must have been doing something or other because he was flying around on her dime to come and get busy or whatever the hell they were doing while they were in on all of this as well. But, and yeah, I mean, he did profess his love for Omar to his wife as they were getting ready to divorce. So I do believe that there was something physical going on there, but there's more to the story as well. Christensen pointed out in his video, which I recommend everybody go over and watch, but Christensen pointed out the fact that now that they are married, she does have a clear shot at the money that they paid his firm, which I'm sure that he took a large chunk out of. I mean, it's his right, it's his business to take the profit as needed to and pay himself whatever salary he needed. But now she's got a clear shot at that, and she is vested in the firm. So I am wondering how that is going to affect the political consulting now that by marriage law she's vested in the firm as well. But on top of that, she's also facing FEC complaints left and right, and talk about the fact that she was married to her brother for immigration fraud. And given the fact that Minette's firm is very strongly involved in the campaign, it's likely that he knows more about that marriage situation and the fraud than he would like to let on. And given the fact that they are married, they do have spousal privilege at this point, which means that even if they were to go out and get divorced, they never, ever, ever have to testify against each other for anything. Whether they're still married, whether they divorce, or anything else, the fact that they have been married means that they never have to testify against each other. They can, but they can't be compelled to. So, good job on skirting the system here. That's definitely interesting. And like Christian said on his video, anytime Ilhan Omar gets married, you do have to wonder what the ulterior motive is, because she always seems to have one. And then I do have one more article on this from The Blaze. Ilhan Omar's campaign has paid her new husband's political consulting firm more than $500,000. There is a pending FEC complaint, and yes, like I said, now they don't have to testify against each other. This is from Chris Enlow. Representative Ilhan Omar, Democrat Minnesota, announced on Wednesday that she had married her political strategist Tim Minette. Now, Omar faces renewed scrutiny for the appearance of campaign finance impropriety. Last August, Dr. Beth Jordan Minette told the New York Post that her husband, Tim Minette, had admitted to having an affair with Omar, which triggered Miss Minette to file for a divorce from Mr. Minette. Omar denied the affair, but by October, she had also filed for divorce from her husband. Quickly after the affair allegations surfaced, which Omar denied, the National Legal and Policy filed a complaint with the Federal Elections Commission alleging Omar had used campaign funds for personal reasons, such as to fund the alleged affair, which, from what they're saying, they're looking at the flights that he took to come out and see her and do the political consulting, because apparently nobody owns a phone. Those allegations, which Omar denied, received new life this week. That's because, according to the Washington Post, Omar's campaign has paid Minette's company, E Street Group, more than $500,000. Peter Flaherty, chairman of the NLPC, said Omar's marriage to Minette underscores the need for an FEC inquiry. You have a member of Congress paying a close friend and now husband the bulk of her campaign spending, and it still raises the question of whether it is to facilitate a personal relationship or whether Tim Minette is the best possible vendor for all these possible activities, Flaherty told the Washington Post, or whether or not it's a corrupt way for, yes, her to get her hands on the taxpayer money that she's using for her campaign free, essentially free and clear. I don't know. There's a lot to go along with this, and I'm sure with the COVID-19 right now, this is all going to fall out of the news, but this is definitely something that we're going to be paying attention to as we go along, because I mean, I live close to Minnesota 5, and I'm sure that a lot of these people aren't happy. I know the surrounding districts aren't happy that she's there, but whether or not the district itself is happy she's there is another thing, and she's got challengers from both sides at this point. I don't think Minnesota 5 can go Democrat, or Republican rather. I don't think they can flip it. but she's got primary challenges as well. So this is going to be an interesting thing to watch and see how this spins along with everything else. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens during their marriage if she doesn't win again, if they wind up divorced or if they wind up actually having a relationship. So, this is Monday, and the last thing that we do here on a Monday is talk about things that restore my faith in humanity. And the thing this week that restores my faith in humanity is the small community. My girlfriend lives in a slightly bigger city and also in one of the counties that's been affected by COVID-19. She went and did a little bit of shopping yesterday. She came over and made dinner for me, but she did it in her hometown and told me how bad the stores were, how people were fighting over everything, and how a lot of the shelves were wiped at the time. And yet, later on that day, because we had missed a couple things and I needed distilled water for my carnivorous plant garden, we went over to the local grocery store where I live in a small town. We walked over there, we walked in, it was calm. The toilet paper aisle was still wiped out, but for the most part, it was calm. There was an air of camaraderie with everybody. Everybody seemed happy to be there. Nobody was pushing, shoving, or anything else, and the shelves were nice and full. The distilled water, there was no problem getting some more of that. There was no problem getting aspirin or anything else. The only thing that you would have had a problem getting out of that particular store was the toilet paper. So small town America still has a sense of community, still has a sense of decency, and we're still good to one another. I'm really glad that I don't live in the city anymore. I know I lived in a bigger city for quite a while, but I think I settled on about the right size city. A little bigger than what I grew up in, a little bigger than where I went to high school, but definitely smaller than where I lived for most of my adult life. Especially given the fact that for 2 years I lived pretty much within a couple miles of the Boston city limits. So I've been in some of the biggest cities in the world, and now I live in just a small town. I mean, I can walk to a store without worry. I can leave my door unlocked overnight. And yet, there's still camaraderie there. There's still decency. I don't have to worry that somebody's going to come and break into my place and try to get stuff. So, small town America, this week you have restored my faith in humanity. We will be back here later on today, so come and check us out over on Ed's World. And even if Miss Foss does not get back to me at this point, we will still go live. I'm going to reach out to somebody to be a possible backup guest, to back up just in case. Or if I have to, I'll do it alone. But we will definitely be back here for Ed's World, talking a bit more in depth about the news of the past week. We've got Super Tuesday coming up tomorrow, or another mini Super Tuesday as well. Another series of states goes into the polls tomorrow, except for the fact that Louisiana has delayed theirs until the COVID-19 outbreak has been contained. So we'll talk a bit about what's going to happen with that tomorrow. We'll see what's going to come. And on Wednesday, of course, we will do Ed's World Gaming, and we're going to do some more Dead Money over in Fallout New Vegas. So join us with that, or join us here tomorrow for another, looks like probably another hour of content that we'll have with Contemporary. Until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.